Welcome to Meet the Creators, a podcast dedicated to the art of business and the business of art. Meet the creative minds behind marketing campaigns, commercials, business, and art. Tune in to better understand the value of creative minds in marketing and business as we build the bridge between business and creative artists. What's up, y'all? This is Mike Ogata. I am a cinematographer here in the Bay Area and co-founder of Flipbird Films, and we are at Meet the Creators podcast. And today we are with Nam Nguyen, and he is a marketing advertising exec and also creative director and business owner and leader of Supervillain. How are you doing today, my friend?
Yeah, it's nice to be here. I know we've been talking about getting together for a while, so it's good to finally make it happen.
Yeah, thank you. You are a fairly busy man, running the business, being creative director and everything. So thank you for your time and having us at the Supervillain.
Yeah, no, welcome to our new office, man. We just moved in top of the month. We're growing. We're a small agency that started a couple years ago, right before the pandemic. So for being a company that I didn't think would survive the pandemic, and for you to be here now is it's an honor, because that means we're still making it happen. So.
That's amazing. When did you guys get started?
Perfect. So I started Supervillain in September 2019. And the craziest part was like when I filled out the application to make ourselves like an official LLC, it was like in August. But the official date that the government shot back to us when like our application got cleared or whatever, Supervillain officially became an agency Friday, September the 13th, 2019. Which is pretty fitting. And it was a full moon that night. I remember I was stepping outside, full moon, Friday the 13th, and I was just like, yo, this is the right vibe. Here we go.
That's very Supervillain vibe right there. To be
sure.
Launched on the 13th of Friday.
Yeah.
Let's take a few steps back, because
Sure.
I'm very curious, because I've been working with you, but tell everyone a little bit about like how you got started in the industry.
Yo, it was a journey to marketing advertising, right? Like I went to school for advertising after switching majors like 4 times, right? So then I eventually ended up as an advertising major at San Jose State. And I guess no matter where you were at the time, Goodby, Silverstein and Partners was like the agency you had to be at, right? They did all the Got Milk stuff. They were super famous. They were local. So coming out of graduation, I thought, I was going to go right into the business. I actually didn't get hired anywhere. Like, not only that, I was a top ad student at the time, but I didn't realize San Jose State wasn't like one of those like ad programs that people like really coveted or respected. So instead of that, I had this other life in nonprofit, so I had started a nonprofit, been a part of a lot of nonprofits when I was younger. And so I decided to just go that route instead. So I worked in the nonprofit world for a few years, a couple years, but always had this like creative calling, and I was challenged one evening by my mentor to go into advertising, to try it again, right? Because he was like, yo, you got a talent there, right? We need more people in those spaces like you, like who wanted to change the world, but we need you in those industries, right? So he challenged me to do that. I mean, that was during my time with Project Cornerstone, which is still a nonprofit that's down here in the South Bay. And yeah, man, so I was working at the time as the director of alumni giving at my old high school, Archbishop Mitty. So I was working in education, and I was still on the boards of these nonprofits. And I started applying to Goodby, right? Because I opened up some Craigslist postings, and Goodby was just like hiring like a storm, because they just won, I think, like Sprint and Hyundai. And I applied for basically every opening possible. Like creative director, I had no business applying for creative director, producer, and I was already doing some film stuff. I applied for everything, and then I finally got a job there as a videographer, right? So I got a job there as a videographer for the strategy department, and that's how I got my foot in the door, And then from there, the rest is kind of history.
That's amazing that you're able to get in there. You applied for creative director, just no fear, just trying anything.
Yeah, I think at that point, right? Like when you're young, man, like I don't know, one of my old mentors was like, yo, how you can get the job if you don't apply? Right? And of course they're not going to hire me as a creative director, but I'm like, yo, like they're going to pass on a bunch of people. I applied for account director, producer, this videographer role, and finally, like, I interviewed for this videographer role, and I actually got an offer that day, you know. So I showed up in an ad agency with like a tie. I was wearing like like slacks, dress shoes, and a tie, which like no one wears in the business, right? Yeah. Unless if you're like managing director or something. And I remember I got an offer that day, and the one thing that they said was just like, yo, when you show up for work next, just don't wear that. Yeah, just don't wear that. But yeah, man, so I got my start in advertising at Goodby as a videographer.
Were you already doing videography work?
Yeah, you know, funny enough, man, like I was doing, because I had worked at all these nonprofits, I was making all the films for the nonprofits, right? So I was making films for the nonprofits for like fundraising and stuff like that. So I was already kind of doing like production work there. And then on the side, just because I wanted to like flex and learn more, because I was like more of a hobbyist than anything else, I was shooting weddings as well. So I actually have shot like a few weddings during my time, but that was just really to like cut my teeth. And
I would have never guessed.
Yeah, man, yo, I got this like peppered background, you know, but yeah, I was shooting nonprofit videos, I was shooting weddings, I was making, you know, grew up in high school making weird videos of like me and my friends doing stupid shit, you know, like, I mean, that's what you do when you're in high school, right? Like,
you're getting scrappy, just trying everything, right?
Trying everything, yeah.
This is like the mini DV tape days, right?
It was, man. It was a mini DV days, and my first camera ever was a 1.3 megapixel camera, like still camera. That started in like my interest in photography. It was dude, guess how much it was? It was 1.3 megapixels, and this was in high school, and it was like $1,200. Isn't that wild?
Yeah, we got cell phones now, just doing the most.
But that's why, like, you know, but that's something I try to remember throughout my career. Though, is like, yo, we were making gold back then with very little, you know. And so I always like big budgets and all, but sometimes I still like the challenge of like how much can you do with not a lot, you know.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that, right? Like a lot of amazing stuff comes with the limitations in your budget. You have to be creative.
For sure.
It's
a beautiful constraint, right?
Yeah, I mean, you got to make it happen.
For sure.
What was it like working at such a big agency like Goodby? Like, did you keep quiet? Did you just work hard, let it shine? Were you networking? Like, what was that like?
It was wild, man. Cause like, you know, you're going in, like, you start at this agency that is like world famous, right? And during my time there, we had won Agency of the Year 2 years in a row, Agency of the Decade, Media Agency of the Year 3 years in a row. So like, it was a really special time there. And no, I mean, I didn't really keep quiet. You know, I wasn't like out to like cause a ruckus, but I was just there to really learn, you know. Like I just knew that opportunity to be there, I wasn't gonna mess up, right? Like if I could just be in the room, if I can just like shoot meetings, if I can just shoot anything, I just want to be involved and be around the work, right? And then from there, you just kind of have to have the faith that like, as long as you're willing to like put in the work, be in the room, be positive, build relationships, that, you know, hopefully it was going to happen over time. And there were some really great people there, you know, like a lot of people who I think, you know, recognize effort. And Goodby was a place that really celebrated just like natural talent, right? Like, because at that time they had hired a lot of stand-up comics and improv comics to be creatives. And, you know, Zach Canfield, who's like the head of talent there, started out as like a facilities guy, right? So it was already an environment that I think rewarded like entrepreneurship and really rewarded like different skills, but it was really on you to bring it, right? Like no one was gonna be like, yo, like, can you do this thing? Like, can you bring that to the effort? And like probably one of the most famous stories, Little Dicky, right? Little Dicky was a Goodby guy, who's a Goodby account guy who, I think, I wasn't there when he was there. I left right before then, but Little Dicky was an account guy who made all of his like account status reports raps. And next thing you know, he's like, he's got an FX TV show and like, you know what I mean? So I think that's so much a part of it, right? Is like, what type of bravery do you have? Because that's what creativity is at the end of the day, right? Like, are you willing to put yourself out there and share it?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not gonna like say it was easy, but you said the environment was relatively nurturing.
It was, yeah. It wasn't easy for sure, but it was pretty nurturing and like. But yeah, I mean, when I first started there, they put me in this like weird nook that was right by the stairwell that people would walk up and down, and no one really sat there before, right? But they had sat me there, and I had a garbage can, and people would just like, I remember, man, people just walk by you and they throw garbage, like they'd throw coffee in the garbage can. It was so close to me that like if there was still coffee, it would like blow up and like be on my back. And there was this, and you know, the guy I sat outside his office, you know, super cool dude named Tannen. Like everyone thought I was his assistant, so I'd be like deep working, and people would be like, "Yo, where's Tannen? Where's Tannen?" Right? And so it's one of those environments where, you know, like I went into it, even though like I had like founded a nonprofit and like had done really well in that space, was really well known in my community for being, you know, someone in like the community service organizing space. I had to really humble myself and just, you know, be like, yo, I'm starting from the bottom, right? And this is not about any disrespect, but it's about just being a part of the system, you know, and not blowing the opportunity and not like just soaking everything up. And every shot that I had to be in a meeting or whatever, I take it, you know, like it wasn't even about saying anything. I just wanted to be in the room to listen, you know, but that's what really started it all, you know, was that. And then not only that, man, like, you know, in the role of a videographer, I kind of took a different approach where if I could help any project, I was going to volunteer. And I did, you know, and that's how it all kind of started. You know, I just tried to be a part of it as much as I could, you know.
Yeah, that's pretty smart to let that camera, so you're sort of hiding behind it, but letting it be like that vehicle for you to get into more doors there.
Totally. Like I knew my strength, you know, and I think one of the strengths that, you know, people talk about is also knowing what you don't know, right? And like, I didn't know how to be a strategist, you know, but I knew how to make really dope films, right? So I would work with the strategists to turn their briefs into films. Or like, if we had to go do like audience consumer research, that was part of my job, was like, let's go, instead of just like pointing the camera, I'm gonna set it to a score, I'm gonna take some dope B-roll, I'm gonna cut this thing like a music video, and next thing people are like, what is this? You know, and that started to get me a little bit more inroads in terms of like, hey, this guy's thinking different, you know? He's contributing in a way that's like moving the work forward and moving the team forward.
That's pretty tight, because I know they do like a lot of like internal like proof of concept stuff there. Cool. And like, I don't know if, are you part of like what started that type of like scrappy, like let's just shoot it and give the ideas, or?
No, you know, I wasn't a part of the group that started it, because we had this amazing production unit called E-Level, and they were this amazing, and they were great friends of mine, because I'd spend a lot of time with them, because I would help them out a ton, and you know, if they needed like an extra camera or they needed like another editor or something, like I'd always be like, hey, I can help. And vice versa, and they would help me on some of my projects, right? So we built this really great relationship. And actually, some of those guys are right down the street, you know, where the Buffalo roam. They were some of the guys down on E-Level, and those guys are legends, you know? But yeah, man, so it was one of those things where they used to do that, right? Like they used to work with the creatives and do spec spots, and we were cut from the same cloth, where like, they were trying to like make a name for themselves, which they did, you know. I think they're legends in their own right, and I kind of took their lead, right? Like, and so when there wasn't like a ton of budget to bring E-Level into a project, yeah, I'd go out and I'd do some spec spots for creatives, but it wasn't anywhere near the quality of what they did. But they also never like thought I was stepping on their toes. They were always really supportive, you know. And so it was one of those things where, I mean, I was really blessed to be in an environment where everyone was just down for the cause, you know?
That's awesome. I always like get intimidated thinking like these places are really cutthroat.
Yeah, I mean, they can be. Yo, I'm not gonna lie. Like, big reason why Supervillain's the name that it is like I didn't make, like I have a lot of friends in the business, but I also made a few enemies, you know, and I'm okay with that. Like those guys know who they are, and I'm okay with them not vibing with how I work, because I don't necessarily agree with how they work, you know?
Yeah. You know, it's interesting. I saw the master class with Silverstein Goodby.
Oh, yeah.
It's pretty dope how, like, simple they want to keep things. And, like, I forgot which one of them, but they got annoyed. Like, you keep making commercials that are over 60 seconds. So he drew out his own, like, iMovie version of, like, this is a 60-second commercial. It should only be this long. And it was, like, so, like, straightforward. Like, time it, read it out.
Oh, man. Like, I remember, like, those guys used to scare the hell out of me, man. Like, because they're so iconic, right? Yeah. They're legends, and I just remember every time I had to go later in my career there, right? When I was already there for a few years, and I was like all of a sudden getting meetings with them. Wow. I remember the account people or the creative directors that I was working with, they'd be like, yo, keep the slides tight. Like, no fluff, you know, don't put too many words on it. You know what I mean? Like, just keep it sharp, keep it simple. And I gotta say, man, like, Goodby was like that was the equivalent of getting like an MBA, man. You know? Yeah. Real fast. And everyone there was so talented. Like, it made you like stay at the top of your game. But yeah, so I spent 4 years there. But yeah, to their point, like, that's also where I learned how to just think a lot quicker, keep things super simple, be real emotional in the storytelling, because they're also very great storytellers. But yeah, no, it was an amazing agency to be a part of.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
What happened next? Where did you like transition? Did you move out there telling stories or applying it to somewhere else?
Yeah, you know, so my next job, so I was there for 4 years, and then I had won Employee of the Year there, right? Wow. Yeah, so I went from like, it was cool, man. Like, that was such an honor, you know, like, because I loved that place. Yeah. And to be named Employee of the Year, because like all your peers, you know, kind of, you know, nominate you, vote for you. And that was a big honor. But, you know, the business is tough sometimes, you know. So I remember I went on my Employee of the Year trip, and when I got back, my new boss at the time called me into his office. He was like, when I landed back from Vietnam, because being Employee of the Year, they give you a lot of money and they give you time to go on vacation, because they're like, yo, we know you've been grinding, like, you need to take a break, and here's some money, right? And extra time off. And so I took my dad to Vietnam, and when we literally landed back in the States, I get an email from my new boss telling me to come in the next day, even though I still had like 3 days off. Told me to come in the next day, and when I came in the next day, there was a stack of envelopes, and he's like, yo, we're letting go of your whole team. And at that point, I had built like this department. Like, I built this small team of like, you know, producers, filmmakers, whatever, because like the thing that I was making is like mini docs that I was making for brands was starting to grow and blow up, you know. And he was like, yo, you have to let go of your whole team. I never wanted to leave Goodby. You know, I thought I was going to be honest, I thought I was going to work there the rest of my life. I'm born and raised from the Bay. Yeah. It's in the heart of San Francisco, at the gates of Chinatown. Like, it was the perfect place. Like, I did not want to leave. But that was hard, because that was a business decision that they had to make, because we had lost a piece of business, right? And so with that, I decided to resign. They weren't going to fire me because I was Employee of the Year, but I decided to resign so 2 of my guys could stay.
Wow, okay.
Yeah, because I knew at that point, like, if I won Employee of the Year, like, I was already getting phone calls from a bunch of different agencies to be recruited, right? And so I was like, look, I'm going to be able to find a job a lot easier than these guys. And one of the guys that ended up staying, his girlfriend was working there at the time, and I was just like, look, like, he needs to stay here more than I do. You know, I was already kind of ready for my next thing, be it at Goodby or somewhere else. So I just called one of the agencies that I was kind of like just like flirting with back, and they flew me out to New York, and I signed that same day. You know, like, they gave me the tour, they gave me the offer. At the time, I brought my ex-girlfriend, you know, because I was like, yo, we're going to do this, we're going to move. And I signed the offer the same day, and I came back to San Francisco and was like, yo, I'm moving to New York. And that was 360i that brought me out to New York. So that's how I moved on from Goodby, but I literally thought I was going to be there forever.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Just so I get an understanding, like, you started out as a videographer, and what did you transition to there in that 4th year?
Yeah, so I started as a videographer, what they call the planner's videographer. So it was a videographer for the strategy team, where I was like, literally my job was filming focus groups. It was just my job to set up a camera and just like film focus groups. And then by the time I left as like the head of cultural strategy, which was this group that was making like these documentaries. We were making documentaries, coffee table books for brands, for like Camaro and you name it, right? Like, we were actually, that was like the early days of like what was gonna be social content. Because we were making content that was cheaper, high quality, designed for digital, designed for people, right? Direct to consumer. And I basically took that department model that I built, and I presented that to 360i, and then 360i was like, yo, we want that. And that's how I went to 360i to found the content studio there, where we were doing social content, which led to like Oreos dunk in the dark and like, real-time content, that was like the whole kickoff of like social media content for brands,
Wow.
Yeah.
Tell me, when did you move, or roughly when did you move to New York, and what is 360i?
'Cause I'm not gonna lie, man, like it hurt letting go of my team, right? It hurt coming back from my Employee of the Year trip where I just I killed myself for 4 years building this thing from nothing, right? It was a new department, new thing, and I thought it was the future, right? I was like, yo, every brand is gonna need some of this stuff. And my new boss at the time, who didn't really get me or get what we were trying to do, made a decision, and I was mad, man. I'm not gonna lie, I was mad. So I literally hopped on a plane and flew to the agency that to 360i. And at the time when I flew out there, they were just getting started in like this world of social content, right? They were previously an SEO company, did some influencer, like the early days of influencer marketing they were on top of, but no one had ever heard of them. Like no one, right? Even when you went to their website, it was like a horrible looking website, man. It was like gradients. It was just like, it was this thing where, I mean, I'm sure it probably looks dope now, like looking back at it, but like, you're just like, people didn't know about it, right? At the time, I didn't really care. I was just like, I just want to be in a place that supports the vision, I just want to be in a place that supports me, that understands me, values me, and gets the vision, and will let me try this somewhere. And so I flew back, and I remember telling people like, hey, I'm leaving, I'm going to 360i, and everyone's like, what, who, where, Yeah, they're an agency based out of New York in Tribeca, and by the time I left there, 360i had made Ad Age's A-lists, they had made, some really famous work by the time I had left, and it was cool because like, it was nice to feel like I was a part of that, like I wasn't responsible for that because everyone's responsible for that, but I definitely remember going to 360i and I was like, yo, there's something special here that I can bring to, and I was super proud to be a part of that. But now they're a really reputable creative agency,
Were you creative director, or were you a different role?
Yeah, I was one part creative director. The thing is, man, like people have always had a hard time defining me, right? Because when I started at Goodby, and I don't think I answered your question, but when I started at Goodby, I was Planner's videographer. When I left, I was head of cultural strategy. Yeah, so I was very much of the strategic world, right? Like, but making creative content around it. And at Goodby, I could have probably never become a creative director, justifiably so, because there was so much amazing creative talent. Like, I could be an amazing creative partner to them, but I knew that, like, I was getting outgunned there, right? Like, I wasn't going to get my shot there, right? Because there was such great creative talent, of which I was friends with a lot of those guys, and I just, and I really loved my role in the strategy place. But when I went to 360i, they saw me very much as a creative, right? Because I was making content, I was coming up with ideas, I was making mini campaigns, and they needed some creative bolstering. Of which, like, don't get me wrong, like the creative folks at Goodby, I think they very much viewed me as a creative in a lot of ways, but I was never gonna be a creative director there because like there's just such elite talent there, right? Yeah. But when I went to 360i, I was basically the founder and creative director of the content studio, right? So I ended up being a creative director there, which was great because it allowed me to blend my creative background, or pretty much creative background, with my strategy background, and that was that,
One interesting thing that I would love to know is like, as much as you know today about creative direction, like how would you like describe it, and like how did you, like what is it from then to now, like that you change or understand?
Well, it's funny, man, because like I think there's some dudes in this industry that have really come after me because creative directors that have come after me because they're like, you're not a creative. Okay. And I'm like, okay, cool. They're like, or you're like, yo, you're actually a strategist. You're just a planner. Like, if I can show you, and I'm not gonna put them on blast, but I got emails, I got evidence of dudes that would make them sweat today, right? That are the most vile, hateful things that you could probably ever read. When I show some people, they're like, yo, this is nuts. but people were upset that I was like a creative director, right? Like I made this jump from being a strategy guy at Goodby to a creative director at 360i, and then being the head of the president and head of creative at one point at Narrative, you know. There were people that were upset that I like didn't take the traditional pathway, right? So my definition of creative director is going to be different. You know what I mean? Than like someone who went to school for like whatever. But I really think at the end of the day, being a really great creative director is, are you making the team better, right? Do you have the vision to make the campaign or the piece, you know, the most impactful, you know, and the most remarkable thing possible, right? Are you enabling that work to happen, especially if you have teams underneath you, right? At every level, from makeup artists to wardrobe to grips to writers to the account people to the strategists, right? Like, because we're in the business of creative, right? Like, creative direction isn't a role where you just step back and you're just telling people what to do based off your vision. That to me is artistry, right? Got it. That to me is like, yo, like that's like Human who you talk to, and she has that vision, and everyone's like going towards that vision, right? Yeah. I fundamentally agree with that. It's the same in the advertising space, because like sometimes you lock onto creatives who have a fundamental vision, but I think to me really great creative directors are also really strategic because they understand the brand objectives. Yes. Right? They understand the lifetime value of the work. Mm-hmm. Right? They understand how to bring the best out of people, and I've always been a real critic of art business because I don't think it's done necessarily the best in grooming people, right? Because it is so competitive and it is about the awards, and you know, there is a lot of like want for fame in that, you know, and a lot of people have taken, you know, credit for my work over the years, or even told people that they had my job because of this like fame grab. But to me, that's not a real creative director, man. Like, you know, at the end of the day, to me, creative direction's about removing yourself from the equation, right? Especially if you're working the agency side, removing yourself from the equation so you can get the best collective output, because that's going to make the work better. But at times you got to step up and be that person if everyone's freaking out or like, you know, they don't know what it is. You got to set the tone. You got to set the vision.
Yeah, I think that's definitely where like even I got a misconception understanding it's not just being like a badass creative, like and just like being the hermit or like the introvert, like doing the work. There's like the process management, the project management, the team management. Totally, because what's it worth if you're a creative director that no one wants to work with? Like, you may make award-winning work for that moment, but like, I don't know, that's a tough career, man. Like I'd rather be someone that like do amazing work, of which, like, you know, we can talk about some of the work. Like, I'm really proud of the things that I've done, right? But at the same time, I'm also really proud of the fact that like people also really want to work with me, right? Yeah, I mean, I could attest to that too personally. I mean, the projects we worked on, you're still asking at 10 o'clock at night, how can we make this better? Yeah, and that makes me sound like I'm driving you into the ground, right? Like, we're working on a project, I'm like, yo, but really it's you know, it's in the spirit of like, it'd be nice to hear your experience with that too, because like, when I'm like on the edit with you at 10, I'm like, yo, Mike, like, how can we push this? Did you ever feel like I was just like drilling you? Was I like a complete asshole, or like was it? No, was it like, not even because you're on camera with me. Yeah. No. This is my moment to prove that I'm not. No, Nam is not an asshole. Don't take his kindness as a weakness, because he does get real scrappy and he doesn't play around. I had no idea that you had an editing background, but I knew, like, as an editor, we were doing live sessions on Zoom, which is crazy. At 10 o'clock at night, we were. He was just watching me, and he was like, you know, like, I want the music to come up right here, or, you know, let's change these images. And I was just like, you know, all my practice, I was just like editing and going as fast as I can, just because I wanted to show, like, I don't want to waste your time. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of like, I compare it to like, if you have like a badass music artist, right, and you're the sound engineer, like, you want to show them like boom, boom, like, I want to do this. Hey, I want to change this, like, show them so their vision comes to life faster. So I think it was just a great process. And no, you weren't an asshole, but I still learned stuff from everyone, even like less experienced editors, just seeing what they do. For sure. They'll do it a little differently. For sure.
Yeah, no, it's you know, because like, I don't know, sometimes it is hard for some folks. So editors either really love me or they hate me, right?
You are is it over the shoulder or side by side editor for sure?
No, you know, most of the time my style, like even from a creative director standpoint, or even when I was at ECD at Intel, right? Yeah. My style, because I am an introvert, is to always just hang back, man. Like I fundamentally believe in like hiring the right people and letting them do their thing, right? And I think, you know, most people that you work with that have worked with me, if you talk to them, they're going to be like, yeah, no, he gives us the runway, right? Yeah. Because like, you know, at the end of the day, man, like you just got to trust the people you work with, right? Yeah. I'm not an over the shoulder editor at all. Like I usually just sit back and chill. If there's something that like needs to get there, I can come in, at least because I've edited before. Yeah. I can come in, I can help get there with you, right? Because I know exactly like the terminology, what's possible. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Because I think there were a moment in that edit we were struggling, and I was like, okay, we're not getting there. All right, Mike, let's do this. Yeah. But I think hopefully what that came across as is like, okay, like we're speaking the same language at that point. Yeah. Because there's nothing worse than a creative director coming in and being like, yo, the timing's off, fix it. You're like, well, it's not funny enough, fix it. Yeah. You're like, wait, like, you know what I mean? Or the image is wrong, find another one.
It's like the movie Whiplash, where he's just like, all right, start from the top. You start the music, 3 seconds later, no, this is not.
I'm actually glad that I didn't have a creative director background. I didn't understand what it was to be a creative director in space, because like, I just approached creative direction, became a creative director based off of what I felt was the best thing to do. I didn't have any preconceived notion of how to be, right? Like I just was just like, no, I want everyone to win. Yeah. I want it to be the best thing possible. We're gonna get there together, and how can I be the facilitator of that, you know? Yeah, I think that comes with like the type of leader who's willing to spend time in the trenches, even if they are busy, just to make sure every project gets there. Yeah, for sure. You know, and yeah, no, and there's a lot of creative directors that do that too, you know, so this is not me knocking creative directors, because there's a lot of incredible creative directors out there. But, you know, I think the old way and the old type of creative direction that I think where I've at least run into some issues with is done, you know? Like, you know, like these days, today, like you have to be a creative director that inspires people, you know? And yeah, especially now, man, like you see the whole anti-work stuff or toxic workplaces. People don't want to go into the workplace. And as an agency owner, you know, I'm always thinking about that too. It's like, well, why don't people want to go into work? Is it because the work sucked or their colleagues sucked? Or is it because like the environment sucked and their bosses sucked, right? And so I think we've gotten to this place though where like, yo, in order to produce great work now, if you don't know how to bring the whole team up, be it your own agency folks or the crew that you've hired, the talent on set, the client with you, if you don't know how to make that whole thing one harmonious, you know, kind of experience, I think you're going to have a hard time in the future of this business, you know?
Yeah, or you have to just reposition like where you want to be in the industry. Yeah. Because that's... Everyone wants to be like a director or a creative director, but like, what does that really mean? Like, what type of sacrifice?
Yeah, or go be an artist at that point.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with that. Like, everyone has different personalities.
It's just like your vision, like. But that's one thing. Like, I learned so much from Goodby. Goodby had this like really great line. It was like art serving capitalism, you know. Mm-hmm. And I was like, yo, that was real. Like, we serve capitalism. Like, we serve the brand. Like, we serve trying to move the needle in these areas. But if we were just doing art, that's for ourselves, you know, which I think people should still do, you know, like. Absolutely, but yeah, anyways, hopefully that answered your question, Anna.
I think it's I really love just these deep dives we do, just like philosophy and just mindset. Yeah. I mean, this podcast is about like the art of business and the business of art. And me being like in the artist side, like I never wanted to touch the business side until I started Flipbird Films with my team. And I was like, I didn't want to do business. Like I didn't think I could do it. I think that's just so important to help artists learn business.
For sure.
How important has that helped you, like strategy, like, already being an artist, but like being able to speak to like account executives and marketing folks, the business side, being able to speak that, merging the two?
Yo, it's been wildly beneficial. I think for example, because like how I work with creatives, actually, what's crazy is like, because I still respect the artistic process deeply, man. Like when I hire directors or anyone, like I'm like, yo, bring yourself to this, and I'm gonna do everything in my power if we're on the same page to just get out of your way, right? To just let the artists do their thing, right? And I think I'm only able to do that, and I've been lucky enough to work with a lot of directors and creatives that have had the opportunity to do that, because I can communicate the business value to why that approach is right to like a brand or to the marketing director or to the marketing manager, as to like why we need to trust these people. Like, you know what I mean? So I think when you can talk business and talk about the strategy and talk about the approach, and you've done all that legwork to be like, hey, we got to this part where we're about to produce this piece or this like piece of creative or pieces of creative, everyone's already bought in, because from a business standpoint, strategic standpoint, audience standpoint, it's all sold through, And as a creative, your ability to do that and be really present in that sense is not just great for the business, right, and the clients that you work for, but it's also great for the creative teams and the production teams, because like they know that you got them covered. Yeah. Right? And it's not just about pushing a creative vision where you push, it doesn't end up being the thing and everyone's like upset or you're upset or whatever. But at the end of the day, like, I think we've created over my career, we've created work that was not only like the best possible creative outcome, and sometimes it does get watered down, and sometimes it does scale back, but everyone on the team ends up leaving happy because they understand what it's about. Yeah. Right? Like, it's the ability to communicate to creatives as to why we need to make certain sacrifices or changes or contingencies is just as important as helping the clients, the marketing managers, or account people understand why you're pushing for the creative.
That's pretty amazing, because you're almost like putting your mind into how are the editors thinking, how are the artists, how are these marketing folks and these like executives thinking too? For sure, man.
If it like, that's the thing. Like, I always tell people, and everyone always laughs at me because I'm always like, yo, I'm not the best creative. Like, I'm not good at the creative, and everyone's like, nah, you're pretty good. I'm like, they're like, shut up. They're like, you're like trying to like gain like. What do you call it? You're just trying to like pull compliments out of us. I'm like, no, guys. Like, I think I'm good at the creative for sure, but where I'm best is at building teams and running teams, right? And making sure everyone is bought in, right? Because that's the hardest part, man. Like, and that's where the work really sucks. Is like if people are at each other. Right? Yeah. If the vision's misaligned or someone thinks that they're in it for themselves, like, then there's resentment on the teams. If there's too many egos, like people, like, and I've been in those situations where I've had to manage those teams, but I think my one real skill though is just making sure that, we have harmonious teams, because you can put yourself, or I can put myself in the shoes of everyone. I know exactly what the director's thinking, because I've been one, right? I know exactly what the editor's thinking, because I've been one. I know exactly what the grip is thinking, because I've been one. I know exactly what the client is thinking, because I've been one, right? It's one of those things where I've had like nearly every role in this business, and that's been like really helpful. Is like that insane curiosity for other people's responsibility and how they value their work and the impact that they want to make, and me understanding that has been the biggest strength of my career, I think.
It's like a player's coach.
Yeah, it's like a player's coach. Yeah. Exactly, man. It's like, like, I don't know, life's too short to hate each other, man. Like, yeah. Life's too short to be angry, like, but when we can all leave something and collectively feel like we won, like, that's where I find the most joy,
That's amazing. So when did you eventually like leave, like in a nutshell, like going from New York, when did you make your way back?
After 360i, I went to go work for this really incredible woman. Her name is Trisha Clark Stone, and she had launched an agency with Russell Simmons called Narrative, right? And I had met Trisha, and she was launching, and we vibed, and so I helped build Narrative with her, right? And that was a great like experience, right? Because I was always about the culture. I was always about the culture and music, and that was an opportunity to be part of that. And I was always really into fashion. I may not be the most fashionable, but Trisha, if you met her, she's just like yo, she's dialed in from a fashion standpoint, and we got some great projects in that space because of her. And so it was a really great opportunity for me to see if I can build an agency. I've always built really great teams, but it was that moment where I was like, yo, can I be a part of building an agency? And so Trisha, and I met, and that kicked off, a really great relationship where I was able to help build narrative with her. That was hard. It was hard though, right? Like I always think about her when I'm building Supervillain, because it's like, it's hard business building an agency, right? And for her to be a woman building an agency, Black woman nonetheless, right? Like she did it, right? She did it, she exited, and I learned a lot from her and that whole team. But that job, because it was so much, and New York was so much, right? Like New York itself ended up being a grind. I remember I had a panic attack one night, right? Like and you don't know what's gonna happen, right? Like you don't know that you're burning out. Like, dude, like I remember right before it happened, I was like, it was great. Like I think we had just pitched something, and I was at home with my ex-wife at the time, and I remember just telling her, she was cooking, I think, and I walked into the bedroom, and I was like, yo, I'm just gonna lay down for a second. Next thing you know, dude, like she comes in the bedroom, she sees me locked up. I'm just like completely, my body is locked up. Like I was like sweating. Like, I don't even remember if I was like screaming or not. I literally thought I was gonna die, man. Like it was just like a crazy experience. I didn't even see it coming. She was freaked out. And eventually it was crazy, because I think she eventually just held me until it stopped, right? But it was after that, we talked about just like, leaving New York, because it was just like too much at the time. And at that time we were talking about like starting a family, so we want to be around one of our families, ourselves, like being around one of our parents, so if we were to have kids or whatever, like we'd be nearby. And dude, we quit our jobs. I quit narrative, which was hard to do, and just to move back to the West Coast. Yeah, so that's how I left New York, without a job or anything lined up. Wow. Yeah, so sometimes like that was the hardest thing, man. But I walked away from being the president of like this dope, agency that was like working on some really great projects. But that was really because like I had to do it to like preserve my own health, and my relationship at the time. So,
man, I'm glad you're here today, by the way.
Yeah, thanks, man. Yeah, thanks.
Wow, what are some cool moments working with Russ, or like anything like you could share with us?
Yeah, some cool moments. Like, Russell wasn't really involved. He was involved. Like he lended his name to a lot of things, right? And he'd come to us, come to meetings and stuff. But it was really Trisha, that was the face in the front of the agency. And Russell, it was cool though, because like Russell was across the street, and he, I'm still in touch with a lot of people that worked with him, because they're amazing people. But it wasn't anything crazy as you think, I don't really get starstruck or anything like that, because like at the end of the day, like we were just talking about like the Genius documentary, right? And you're just like, yo, like they're people who are just out doing their thing, right? And working with Russell was interesting, because like it was cool. Don't get me wrong, it was cool because like I grew up on hip hop, right? And so to be in the same room with him and his people and be in that environment was real special, to me in that sense. But at the end of the day, like it was just me and Trish grinding with our team, the team at Narrative, and that was cool. He had backed Trisha, and they had a really great relationship. And sure, it did open a lot of doors for us, for sure. And I met a lot of great people along the way, but yeah, it was pretty chill. It was just like anything else,
So you pretty much sort of like hung up the game for a little while when you left.
Yeah, man. That was the second time in my career where I was like, yo, I'm gonna quit this industry. And my ex and I had left to San Francisco without jobs, and we came here and we like lived with my family for a little bit, just to be like, what do we do next, And so we kind of reset. Yeah. But dude, in very quick order, like I just found my way back.
Yeah.
You know?
I mean, it's important to align, and we have different chapters and times.
Totally. Sometimes you have to walk away from things to understand if it's the thing, you know?
Yeah.
Like, and that was that moment for me and for my ex, because my ex is in the business as well. But we walked away just to understand if like this was right for us, you know? And she eventually found another pathway. I think she's in influencer marketing now. I haven't talked to her in a long time. But from what I understand, she's doing well. And, you know, I eventually found my way back to advertising as well, you know.
What was next when you found your way, and like what type of calling or voice told you to get back in?
I just started talking to a bunch of people. You know, I talked to people from Goodby just to be like, yo, what's going on here? And that felt a little weird, you know, as much as I wanted to go back to Goodby, it was just like a little traumatic for me, you know? Yeah. Just to be like, even like I will always think of that place as a place that I cherish, but I'm also like, yo, but this is also the place I had to leave, you know, like in a way that like really, really stung. But you know, obviously they're doing really well. So I talked to folks from there. I talked to people back in my nonprofit days, you know, of like, yo, maybe I go back in a nonprofit, talk to some of my old mentors. But at the end of the day, I was just like, you know what, I love what we do. You know, like I love it, man. Like I love very much what we do. And, but I was like, well, if I'm going to go back into the game, like I'm going to find a space that I haven't really tried before. Cause you know, at that point, like I've done everything, right? Like I was producer, creative director, strategist, whatever. And so I went into PR. Yeah. So I went to go work at Edelman. And they had this like PR agency thing going on at the SF office. But that was a really great experience for me because I was able to go in there and learn a whole lot about a piece of the communication world, right, that I hadn't touched before or really thought of. And I learned a lot in a short amount of time. It helped change the way I think about things, you know, because of just being in an environment where people were thinking about PR first. It was really special, yeah.
Well, that's pretty cool how you like really revisited like home and like reflected, talked to different people, and then you added another layer with the PR at Edelman.
Totally, man. You know, the thing is like, I don't know, dude, like, yo, I grew up in an environment where everyone thought I was going to be a complete failure. Wow. Right? Like everyone told me that I wasn't going to amount to anything. So when you grow up thinking that you're not going to be anything, you're not afraid to try everything. You know what I mean? Like, yeah. So you're like, yo, of course you didn't think I was going to be this. Of course you didn't think I could do this. So why wouldn't I try it? Right? And so I just flipped that whole idea on its head, right? Just to be like, yo, you say I can't be all these things, but if you literally think I can't be anything, then why wouldn't I just go out and literally try to do everything? Yeah. Right? Because then otherwise, what do you got? Like, then otherwise you resign yourself to just kicking back and just like not trying anything. Right? But then they won, right? Because then those people who told you not to amount to anything literally got inside your head, and you're just your own worst enemy at that point. So yeah, I've never been afraid to jump into trying literally different things and failing, because in a lot of people's minds, I was already a failure, you know? Yeah.
What were you like necessarily doing? Like they'll give you a project where you just like double exceeding it.
Oh, you mean to
like,
come out of that?
Like in general, like being like the person you were, like at Goodby or somewhere, like they'll give you like a small project where you just like, no, I've like double. For sure. Yeah. Yo,
you know what's crazy? And I give this to my dad so hardcore, because when I think I was like 10, bro. Like I was like 10, and I got home and I was like getting bullied, and I had a really shitty parent-teachers conference where they said I wasn't going to amount to anything. My dad was pissed, you know, at me and at the school. And like, I'm like in my room, like just sitting in the fucking dark. Like, I'm like, yo, like, I'm not like, you know, you're 10 years old and you already don't think you're going to be shit. And I was in my room and my dad comes in, and like, I think he had some time to think about it after he was like yelling at me and, you know, doing what Asian dads do. Right. And so he comes in and he's like, you know what? This world is hard, right? And he's like, and my dad, you know, my dad's a really accomplished man, but I learned a lot from my parents in the fact that like they had to escape Vietnam and start back in the States with nothing, right? Like that wasn't lost on me as a kid. Like they've always had to they reset, they rebuilt you know? And my dad comes in and he's like, yo, like, he's like, you literally have to be better than everyone else in order to be anything in this world, right? And he said it in Vietnamese, and I can't repeat it because I don't speak Vietnamese, but I remember understanding it. And he's like, if you're not better than everyone else, he's like, you're just not gonna make it, right? And so I remember, like, yo, that shook me as a young kid. And dude, the whole secret to the sauce, because like people were like, oh, you made Forbes 30 under 30, you got there so young, like you made, you were president of a company at this age, and you hit this at this age. I'm like, yo, like, sure, on paper I'm young, but the reality is that I've worked twice as hard. Like I've worked twice as long, twice as hard than everyone. So it's not necessarily that I'm better than anybody. It's just like I've just collectively have worked longer than everybody. Like I've just put in that grind. And that's what it comes down to. Most people who know that about me know how hard I work. But to other people, because I'm so chill and I'm like so casual and I'm so relaxed half the time, I'm relaxed and whatnot because I've seen so much already. And I'm sure I maybe make it feel and look like I haven't like really ground myself into the ground, whatever, because I am that way. But the truth is, man, like it's just like, can you work harder and longer than everyone else has been kind of the key. But the vision is like, if I could do that, if I can just get ahead, I can slow it down later.
That makes sense.
Right?
No, I wanted to make sure that was clear to everyone. Like, this didn't just happen, like, because you're so humble. I was like, let's make sure it's like clear, like you had to outwork everyone.
No, bro, of course, no, it does not happen. I think a lot of people want to believe it's easy because I think that's what people like those are the stories that people like, you know? But the reality is, man, like being an Asian man and in general, where people think we're weak, or people don't, you know what I mean? Like, no, none of this has been easy.
No doubt.
None of it. And don't get me wrong, I've had a lot of supporters and I've had a lot of people that believed in me.
Yeah.
But that's also because like I think they respect the work. Like those are people that respect the work, that really understand that, like who I am, But no, none of it's been easy.
Can't knock the hustle. No. I see that. So essentially, like you've felt like a misfit as an Asian male, being bullied, and you probably felt like a misfit your entire career, and that's how you've been able to like double down and make things work.
You're like, I don't know how to do it any other way than my own way, right? Because the world doesn't make sense to you, because everyone's telling you you're not supposed to be a leader. Right? You're not strong enough to be a leader because I'm like the quiet guy, or you're not like whatever. And so I'm like, yo, at a certain point, if you don't know how to get there, then you just got to bet on yourself and you just got to go, right? And that's what it's really been, man. It's just like I can only bet on my way of looking at the world, and I just go, In
terms of like, role and like who you are, being an Asian male, person of color, and like a suit and tie world. What kind of type of role did you take on in Intel, and like how do you like fit in? Because like you're not like wearing a suit and tie. You're wearing like, you chose to be who you are. Yeah. And how do you like adjust culture? I know I'm throwing a lot of stuff, but I'm letting you freestyle.
It's a great question. You know why? Because it's also really interesting, man. Like race and ethnicity and all that stuff is so interesting. Yeah. And it's not like none of us have it easy. Like. And all of our experiences are so different. And when you look at our teams or any team I've built, they've always been wildly diverse because like I don't really hire for heart, that's what I look at first, and then by the nature of that, you get these really eclectic teams. So I've never really thought about my own race and the areas where like I have privileges as well, but yeah, people think, right? Intel's funny in the sense that people think you're like, oh, that makes a lot of sense because there's a lot of Asian dudes in tech. I'm like, yeah, cool, but I'll tell you one thing for a fact, like there's a lot of Asian dudes in tech, but like going to a 50-year-old technology company, there weren't a lot of Asian dudes like me, right? Like, and all of a sudden I'm like the global executive creative director, right? And all of a sudden I'm pushing to do projects with like The Weeknd and Kill Spencer and everyone's just like, yo, what is going on right now, And there was a rough moment early on where one guy wrote me an email. Actually, no, he stopped me in the hall. Another, like, dude, the amount of emails I have is crazy. But this one guy stopped me in the hall after we had done this project. And he was like, yo, I'm ashamed to work with you. Damn. Yo, straight up. He's like, I'm ashamed to work with you. And it was because I didn't fit the mold, you know what I mean? And I was doing projects that I think were just so different at the time. And at the end of the day, it was all good, right? Because we're actually really good friends now. You know, like, we've done some really great work together at Intel. He's a really good guy. But I think change is hard for people. And at the same time, I think I really confused people because I wasn't like this like really passive Asian dude. You know, like I very much had a point of view at that point. You know, I had seen a lot. You know, I was now in charge of like a global brand and a global team, like, you know, team and global work. I was just like, yo, I have to make sure that like we're seen, we're heard, right? And the crazy part too is like, you know, diversity inclusion efforts are good, and you'll appreciate this being an Asian dude, and so will you guys, because you got Asian brothers in the back here, right? Like running crew. But like, you know, so I'm an executive at Intel at this point, right? Yeah. And so we have this Intel executive meeting at the Fairmont Hotel, and it was just like this crazy moment where, you know, at Intel I'm not considered a minority, right? I'm not considered a minority because Asian men make up like a lot of the workforce. And I'm like, okay, that's cool. Like that makes somewhat sense, right? Sure, but I think you should still recognize this as like a minority with different thoughts, different ideas, different thinking, right? And I remember at this conference, I was talking to them, and I'm like, yo, like, how is it that we can be not seen as a minority at Intel, but the executive leadership at Intel only make up a very small percentage. Right. Asian men make up a very small percentage of executive leadership at Intel, right? Because I remember I was at this executive meeting, and I was just like, yo, like, I was expecting to see more guys like me, like at least not guys like me, but guys that look like me, and I didn't see that many, you know? And it was just like one of those things that like, that was just a really quick reminder that there is this, you know, ceiling for Asian men when it comes to leadership, because we're not seen as strong or as leaders and whatnot, but we're seen as really hard workers. They know that I'll work twice as hard because that's what my dad told me, right? And they'll know I'll keep my mouth shut. Yeah, passive. But, you know, but what they didn't realize was that they had me, right? So that was interesting, you know what I mean? But the Intel experience, like, I got a lot from that too, man. They really did value me. And again, this is not about starting fights with anyone, right? Because half the time, all this stuff is mostly innocent, but I think it is my responsibility to challenge the way people think.
Talk about challenging them. You made that weekend music video.
Oh, yeah.
Tell us a little bit about that process. And,
for sure.
Like, you guys got to see the video, but I'll let you talk about it.
Yeah. Intel at the time was, you know, we were trying to be an experience company. We were working a lot in music and entertainment, in gaming, etc. Right? Through my time in New York, like, you know, I worked with this really great guy, Nick Pacelli, who I met at Goodby, right? Who had, you know, was working at Republic Records at the time. And I told him, I was like, yo, I got this new gig at Intel, and I really like Abel. You know, I really like The Weeknd. You know, I really like what he's about, his artistry, etc. And he's just like, perfect. Like, he's about to drop a new album, right? And I was like, what's the new album? He's like, yo, it's called Starboy. I'm like, yo, this is perfect. Starboy. And we had this thing called Intel Shooting Stars, which were the drone light show stuff that we were about to launch and do a lot of work for that you saw in the Olympics. I knew like The Weeknd was like really into technology just based off of being a fan, right? And innovation, right? And I also knew that he was the type to not take like the most obvious brand deals, right? Like he went to Puma versus like a Nike. Like he was also just a guy too, and he and his team was always just trying to make statements, like, which is why I was really vibed and identified with what he and his team were building. And so I was like, yo, we have to do something together, right? And so he was just like, well, does Intel want to help fund his first music video off of the Starboy album? I was like, yeah, definitely. What is it? It has to fit though, right? It has to make sense. And so he's like, it's for False Alarm. And he shows me the script that Ilya was the director of Hardcore Henry, and I was like, amazing. Hardcore, like Ilya's so fire, and Ilya's style very much lends itself to gaming, right? Like it's point of view, and it's like a first person shooter, right? I was like, this is perfect. We sponsor Counter-Strike, right? The Counter-Strike competition. It's like, so we're hitting gaming, we're hitting music, we're hitting technology, or we need to hit technology, right? And so I remember meeting with Ilya, the director, and some people from the Weekends team, and looking at the script, and we worked together, and we were like, hey, yo, what if we actually replaced one of the characters, one of the bank robbers, right, with a drone, right? So instead of it being a human bank robber, we replace it with a drone that can like scout to see when the police is coming, right? And they use it as a tool to like get away from the police, right? And so I was like, yo, this is all cool, right? Like, because to me it's entertainment, right? Yeah. To me it's a music video. It's like a game, right? And so, and I like the great brand experiences where you don't even know the brand's a part of it, right? And so we built in the drone to be a character in the music video. And you should look it up, right? The music video is online. It's called False Alarm, and you see the drone just do the coolest shit, right? Like what Ilya's vision combined with how he wanted to bring the drone in, and what we were able to make happen. Like there's so many parts of that production story itself that was nuts, and we'll save that for like a production conversation with us production nerds, right? Yeah. But you know, when you look at the final piece, right? I thought it was fire, right? Like. It was so well done, and I was so proud of it. But the unfortunate part, though, was that it had moments of violence, right? Yeah. Like there was a cop that like gets shot, right? And I know as a brand, you're going to be really scared of that. But at the same time, I'm like, we're not fully attaching it to ourselves, right? And I'm like, we need to support this artist because he's major. He's gonna be big, right? And like he's even only gotten bigger since Starboy, obviously, right? And not only that, but I respect, like I've had a chance to talk with their team, and like they have this incredible vision of what the future could be, right? And what they want for the world, and which is like, you know, proven now that Abel's won like humanitarian awards, right? His creative director Lamar started a creative school, you know, for you know, kids in Toronto, in the city. Like these are guys that want to move the world forward. So I was like, let's work with them, you know? And they were all about that. That's why they wanted to do this project, for sure. Intel loved it, but when that scene came out where the cop got shot, everyone freaked out. Yeah. Everyone freaked out. And I'm like, guys, no one's gonna know. No one's gonna say a word about this thing. Like, it's because it's a piece of entertainment, right? Yeah. No one says anything when we are sponsoring Counter-Strike contests and people are screaming headshots.
Left and right.
Right? Like, guys, no one's going to know. And that's the project that had someone say that they were ashamed to work with me. I thought my job was on the line for a second. But ultimately, at the end of it, it was totally fine. You know, no one said a word. No one, that we didn't make press for being like cop haters.
It ended up being like a grand slam, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, I thought it was fire. It actually won a few production awards.
Yeah.
Right? And not only that, it started a relationship with The Weeknd and his team that should have gone a lot further. You know, I think there was an opportunity to do a lot with them. Yeah, we should have done a lot more with them, but you know, that didn't happen for a variety of reasons. But I think for me, I saw that as a win. I don't even care if it won awards or whatever, but I thought it was a win because we supported an artist and his vision of what they wanted to create in the world. We found a very natural way for our brand to exist in that piece and to support that. And not only that, we, you know, as Intel, what was crazy is like we're a brand where we're inside of so many technologies. We're like behind the scenes so much. Like the power for us to say, like, no, we were in the drone, like that was very surprising to people, you know? And so that also paid off the marketing objective, right? Of just reminding people that we're everywhere in this world, even if you can't see us, you know?
That's amazing, man. I mean, ended up being, I'm ashamed to work with you too. Thank you almost.
Yeah, no, he and I are cool now, and I think that's the thing. And I never faulted him for saying those things to me because I understood where he was coming from.
Yeah.
Like at the end of the day, man, like I'm a little fearless in a lot of ways, but but people are trying to protect their jobs because they got families, they got families, they got lives. And I just, he didn't know me. Yeah. But if he did know me, he would know I'm not that reckless. Yeah.
Yeah. How do you manage or calculate your risk versus reward? Because that was pretty risky, I would imagine.
It's pretty risky, but I think over the years, man, when you just come from a place and literally I just try to be a better man every day, right? And I try to do the right thing every day. And I think when you can look in the mirror and you can honestly say that that's how you live in the world, any risk you take, it's going to be the right one.
What told you that it was time to create your own agency?
Yeah, man. So, I've always had these like really crazy experiences at all my jobs, right? Like you go in and I really pride myself on making immediate impact in places. Like that was kind of like my signature, right? Like if someone hired me, they knew I was going to make impact right away. And then there always comes a point, man, where I leave a place because not by my own choice, either one, because I had to because it was the right thing to do, or two, because someone made a decision that I didn't agree with that impacted me and my like team. But I've always left places because like I didn't want anyone controlling my fate, especially when I give so much to a place, And after Intel, I had to, after Intel, we had a really prolific 3 years there, right? Like we did some really great shit, everything from the weekend to the drone light, one of the last projects was the drone light shows for the Olympics, right? Like the opening ceremony stuff.
That was you?
Yeah.
Oh shit.
Yeah, man. So we ended on like the best possible note, right? But after that, I had to lay off my entire team, and that was like a lot of people, man. Not like collectively, all the people that impacted, we had to let go of around like 80 people, right? And that was one of the hardest things I've ever had to do. And there's a lot of complications behind that and deeper stories, and I learned a whole lot. But something like that will shake you, And between laying off my whole team and at that time too, I was also going through separation, right? Like my ex-wife left me. Right? And my dad got diagnosed with cancer again. Right? So that all happened within months of each other. Right? So after that was my other moment where I was like, forget this, I'm out. Like I'm done. I'm done with the business. I'm gonna go like be a barista somewhere where I can just focus on making beautiful cappuccinos and just talk to people every day, So after that I took some time off, right? Like I took some time off just to reset. But during that process, I took every interview that I got called for, right? Because again, like leaving a place like Intel as like the global executive creative director, and after just doing like so many, like we were so prolific there. We had done so much and won so many awards, right? Like I got a ton of interviews, and so I took every interview, and truthfully, there was a lot of people that passed on me, There were a lot of people who I think we're like, literally one group was just like, yeah, we don't think you're a strong enough leader, which I was like, that's bullshit, right? And then one group was just like, this job's gonna be boring for you. And I'm like, you're probably right, And then I went and I interviewed for like a good couple months, and then after that, but nothing was exciting me. And there was I did get some offers that, and I just was like, I'm just gonna take a break. And I remember I was just driving. I moved out of San Francisco, moved into the spot in Oakland, and I was like driving back from like a furniture store I had just bought like bowls or something, right? And I get a phone call from Stanford, and it was Stanford Healthcare, and Stanford calls me randomly, or their recruiter calls me, and they're like, "Hey, we're about to launch this new hospital, like this $2-3 billion hospital." And we need someone to come in and run the campaign for it and like run the whole campaign for it because it's a big moment for us. And the crazy part, man, is like when I got that phone call, just days before, I got the phone call that from my dad saying that he just got readmitted into Stanford Cancer Center, right? And so I took that as a sign. I was like, yo, if I take this job, I get to be basically at Stanford when my dad's going through his second round of treatments, right? And so I was like, I'm in. Basically, like, I took a pay cut. You know, I stopped all other interviews. I was like, I'm going to take this job, you know? And so that was wild because I hadn't worked in healthcare before, you know, and I hadn't really freelanced before. But I came in and worked on that campaign, and I got to be there the whole time my dad was there getting treated. And that was like that. If that's the world not telling you what you should be doing, I don't know what is, right? Yeah. And the crazy part is, like, when we the commercial spot we did, I casted a guy that looked like my dad. So if you see that spot, there's a man that's like very reminiscent of my dad, right? And that was cool because I got to pay like a little homage to my pop and cast a dude that looked like him in the piece. But also the crazy part was the day we wrapped production, or the week we wrapped production was the same week he wrapped treatment. Right?
Oh, even more.
Yeah, it was just this weird thing, man. And so that was an amazing experience, you know, and that also afforded me a little bit of time to reflect on what really mattered. You know, when like when you're faced with, like, you know, the potential of your dad, losing your dad, and you lost your job, and then you lost your wife or whatever, you're just like, what am I about? You know, what, like, who am I? What's my identity, right? Like, so I went from the highest of the highs to like having nothing, right? Like just having absolutely nothing, almost everything, almost nothing. And so after reflecting on all that, man, and you know, and having my dad, you know, face, you know, cancer, I was just like, yo, like, I just got this one life, man. If whatever I'm gonna do next, it has to be my own, you know. And so I was already thinking about Supervillain at that point. I was like, hey, I think it's time to start my own thing. And again, like, as the stars would have it, man, our first client was TripShot, this, like, you know, technology transportation company who's doing amazing things. You know, you all should look them up. And what was crazy about that was now my first client that launched Supervillain her name is Nicole, was someone that I taught in ad school. Really? Yep. Someone I taught in ad school back at Goodby. And one of her co-founders, and who's also her husband, was a guy I went on a cruise with, like, as teenagers. Okay. Right? So all of a sudden, dude, the world is just converging into one place to being like, yo, you need it. It is your time, right? Like, this is about creating something where you can just bring a lifetime's worth of ideas and work and effort into. So go do it, right? And so that's how I launched Supervillain. Was just like, yo, the world was telling me that the only thing that felt right was if I bet on myself, right? Because after being let down from my company, my wife, and like the health of, you know, mortality, right? Like, mortality of my own dad, you're like, well, yo, if you're not going to do it now, when are you going to do it? So that's when Supervillain was born.
Wow.
Yeah.
Dang, Supervillain came from so much.
Yeah, Supervillain was like, and you know, to be honest, man, like, I've thought about starting an agency a few times in my career, you know, because I always built things. You know, I built a nonprofit, built teams, and the guys that originally we were supposed to start Supervillain with years ago weren't ready this time around, so I had to go off and do it on my own. But yeah, you know, but the timing was right, you know, like, I mean, Supervillain would not be what it is without the Intel experience, without the narrative experience, the 360i experience, the Goodby experience, the media experience, like everything that I've done, the nonprofit experience, everything that I've done in my whole career has led to this moment, you know? And who knows, man, like, I wake up every day thinking Supervillain might fail tomorrow. That's real. Like, you know, the fight goes on, you know, the work still goes on, and it may disappear tomorrow because for whatever reason, but this is the game I'm choosing to play right now.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Talk about, like, you have all this perspective working on these different companies that people have, big ones, small ones.
Yeah.
Not as many minorities in there and such. Like, how did you want to make your company a certain way?
Yeah, you know, what's crazy is, like, I was always really recognized for building diverse teams. You know, even at Intel, like, I built the most diverse team at Intel, right? and was recognized for it, you know. And I remember the recruiter, one of the talent people at Intel, was just like, well, how'd you do it? How do you, what's your secret? I'm like, dude, it's not like I have some secret where I'm like picking people of different colors to be on my team. Yeah. And I remember what I told him was like, because this is how I've built every team of mine. I was like, yo, I hire for heart first, because you can't teach that, right? Like, I don't care if you're the most talented person, but I care if you're the most capable human being, right? Because you can teach everything else, right? But you can't teach someone how to care. You can't teach someone how to look out for someone else, to be accountable, right? You can't teach someone to do the right thing when the pressure's on, right? Like, that's always been the hardest thing in my mind. So every team I've always built was really heart first. And if you look at that first, right, and you're really trying to hire people that are great human beings, what you're gonna naturally get is a really diverse team. As long as you're interviewing really diverse people, right? And so that's the other balance of it, is just like, yo, tell me who you are first. You show me who you are, that's who I'm gonna hire. And just naturally what happens is you end up getting really diverse folks, right? And so Supervillain right now is not just made up of really different people ethnically and racially, right? Supervillain's also made up of like different people, different parts of their lives, right? Like, we've hired moms coming back into the workforce, right? Because that shit's hard, you know? And especially when you're trying to get back into the workforce where you're expected to work 60, 80 hours a week, and now you got a kid. But I grew up with the mom who grinded, right? And I paid attention. And if anyone pays attention, you know, a mom can do in 8 hours a week what someone does in like 30, right? Like, what a mom does in 30 minutes during her day is the equivalent of like 4 hours for someone else, you know? And so for us, it also hasn't just been about building diverse workforces ethnically. It's also been about, you know, making sure that, like, hey, if you're a good person, we're gonna find a place for you, right? If you can give us 8 hours a week, cool. Like, if it means that you really care about what we're doing, and you care about what you're doing and your contribution to it, like, yeah, let's talk about it, you know? So that's how we get diverse, not only from a racial and ethnic standpoint, but from like a lifestyle standpoint as well, you know?
That's really cool just to know that that's how you're seeing things, not just being like accolades or resumes, but really on like character.
I could care less about that, man. Like, my whole career, it's never been about chasing awards, you know? Like, I've been blessed. I've been so lucky, you know? Like, when I ended up on Forbes list, I remember I got a bunch of emails being like, yo, how did you submit? I'm like, yo, I think that was my company, you know? Like, I didn't win any award because I chased it, you know? Like, and I've been recognized a lot in my career, but I don't really care about that stuff, man, because then what? Then you get it, you feel pretty good about yourself. And don't get me wrong, like, it's a blessing every time I receive something, but it means so much more when I didn't chase it. It means so much more when someone's just like, yo, he deserved it. You know, like Employee of the Year, that meant so much, because not like because I created some campaign. It's because like everyone in the company was just like, you know, this guy deserves it, and they saw it, you know? And that meant so much, you know? But yeah, no, but, you know, but again, like, winning awards is part of the game, right? Like, and I need to be better about it, right? Like, you win more awards, you're more visible, more visible, you get more business. And so now from a business standpoint, I'm looking at it differently, right? From a business standpoint, I'm like, okay, we do need to be more public. We do need to try to get some of this like lucite on our shelves, you know, or metal on our shelves, because like, that means something to prospective clients, you know? But it's not something I've ever really focused on ever.
Like, how would you describe what Supervillain is and like what you guys do?
Yo, good question, man. You know, like, you know what's funny is like, I've gotten that question from day one, of course. And everyone's like, yo, you need to get that elevator pitch. And all I tell people is like, I was like, yo, we're an advertising marketing agency that can solve any problem, right? And they're like, well, that sounds so boring and straightforward, straight to the point. I'm like, well, what else are we? You know what I mean? Like, you want me to say like, we're the anti-agency. Like so many people say they're the anti-agency, but I'm like, yo, go be about it. It's like almost like one of those things where you're like, yo, if you have to say it, are you really? Like, you know what I mean? Yeah. And so I've never really liked to be like, yo, we're the anti-agency or whatever, because at the end of the day, we are an agency. You know, like that's what we do. I just want to operate differently. Like I created Supervillain so we could operate the way that I believe an agency should operate. You know, and I've been doing things differently my whole life, not because I do things differently, but because I believe they should be different. And so Supervillain is a full service marketing advertising agency that really we can solve any problem. You know, like we're doing everything from fully integrated marketing campaigns to product design and development, to branding, you know, to producing, you know, content, TV, websites. We build sites. And we do it for a variety of clients, everyone from, you know, like a sole proprietor, like we're working with this Ayurvedic doctor, you know, who's trying to heal generational trauma through birthing, right? Which I'm super proud of, to like launching Curry brand, to working with Stanford Healthcare, to working in like the crypto blockchain space with players in there right now. And I mean, to working with schools even. Because for us, it's never been about brand chasing either. You know, when I started Supervillain, it was all about what type of impact can we make. Nice. And if the people that want to work with us want to make impact, then we're down to partner, you know, no matter how big or how small. We're just really lucky that we get, like our business model, we get to really leverage, you know, some of the fees and the profit that we make from our really big clients to then go work with these smaller clients that may not be able to afford an agency like ours. Right? But for me, the vision has always been like, how do we create world-class, world-changing work for everyone? Right? And our business model isn't as, you know, lucrative or whatever as others, but at the same time, like, you know, how much money does this, I mean, like, don't get me wrong, we want to make a lot of money as an agency, but at the same time, like, none of that matters unless if you're moving the world forward.
Nice. So really just focusing on like the devotion or like the goal for the team, the mission statement versus like all these like results, and that kind of drives everything, right?
For sure, man. And I think that's how, like, that's why I love our team so much, you know, because the people that are here realize that like are here because they know what I'm about, right? Yeah. And they're here because like no matter if it's a small company that we're working with or a giant company, it's not about like making just only famous work, right? It's about actually making an impact day to day, you know, like truly. And we're not a cause-based agency by any means, you know, where we only work with like only nonprofits or whatever, or only social justice or, you know, or whatever programs. That's just woven into everything that we do. Like we will always look at it from a lens that is hopefully going to move the world towards a vision of which we want to see, right? And so that's why we hire a certain type of person, because like unless if you really rock with our vision of like this very like inclusive, safe, you know, positive, everyone wins, everyone eats world, then maybe you're not right for us. But because our values are so strong and so clear, it kind of self-filters with, you know, how, like who comes and joins us, you know?
How many people about do you have on your team right now?
8 day-to-day, like full-time day-to-day core. And then we have another 20 contractors. Like, you know, so people who are like all over the world who maybe give us like a, you know, who are like more like, you know, it's like the Navy SEALs or something, right? Like you have your core team, but like, yo, if you need to bring in a specialist, like you bring them in. But yeah, but that also keeps us like kind of flexible, you know, at the same time, because, you know, that's the scariest part, man. It's like you want to grow in a way that makes sense, because the one thing I hate doing more than anything is like letting people go, you know? And so we're trying to build this in a way that we're going to have to do it at some point because that's the nature of this business. But yeah, man, our team is smartly constructed for us to hopefully scale appropriately, you know, and we're not trying to grow fast, you know. None of that we work bullshit here, you know.
Yeah. Oh man. So being like a business owner or agency owner, Like, what type of parallels do you see, like, you already knew as a creative director, and like what are differences like that you had to learn?
Yeah, man, you know, I've always been a builder, and I've always known that I was going to always be the most effective creative if I knew the, like, how to operate. You know what I mean? And so you got to blend that art and you got to blend that science, right? Like, and that science being like, well, how do you keep a healthy business, and how do you keep a healthy project, right? Like, how do you get the best possible gain on a project while still retaining a margin that allows you to, like, stay alive as a company, right? Like, that's always the tricky part. But then as you grow and you get more and stack more and more clients, well, you're like, okay, we're going to make a bet where we're going to make zero money on this client because it's the right thing to do. First and foremost, they deserve it. But hopefully it's going to, like, one, be really effective for them. We're going to be able to do great creative work, but we can also hopefully grow with them. Right. And that's my whole thing. It's like, sometimes you make that bet because you want that creative piece in your book. Right. And you're like, and to me, that almost feels like, oh, you're using someone. Like, it's a mutually beneficial gain, right? Like, you get to do amazing creative work, but then, you know, they get something for a reduced fee, whatever. But for me, I'm always like, I always come from a place like, no, how can we create lifetime clients, lifetime relationships, right? Like, that's one of our values, is find people you want to work the rest of your life with, right? Be it here at Supervillain or clients that we bring in. Right. And it's hard, you know, it's this day and age, it's like, it's really hard to run a business, you know, as you guys know, and it's hard to keep up, but we do our best, you know, but thankfully we have a lot of clients that, like, are really forgiving to us, you know, in the areas that we slip and we fall. And I really do believe that's because they know that we're in this whole thing together, right? Like, we're in to build their company together. They're part of Supervillain's present and future. Right? And how do we build the world that we want to see together? So at the end of the day, it's a collective effort where we're all at our relative seats and positions. But, like, if we truly want to be, you know, find people that we want to work the rest of our lives with, like, how are we operating in that way? And so we have clients that are so great and that, like, have been with us and stuck by with us in the areas where I've slipped up as a business person. Right? Because, like, it's my first run where I'm running everything soup to nuts. Like we talked about earlier, yo, I'm out there like Mr. Miyagi with the broom, right? Like, I'm in the work, I'm running the business, I'm out on sales calls, right? Like, I'm out at Costco picking up the sparkling water. Bro, like, I'm literally doing everything.
He's the creative director, business owner, and the janitor.
Yo, I love it, though. You know what I mean? Because for me, like, and we have this beautiful space, right? Yeah. And people are like, why are you getting a space in a remote workforce world, whatever? It's like, yo, like, I'm not trying to listen to what other people are trying to do. Mm-hmm. I'm just trying to show up every day in the hopes that I can create something where people can come in and do the best work of their lives. Right? Like, that's my responsibility as a business owner, you know? Wow. Yeah, it's not people come here and just do what I ask them to do. But it's, like, truly, like, how, because I fundamentally believe, like, if you come and you work for me at any team in my career, you probably either still have a relationship with me or you still have a relationship with people from that team that's tight, right? And that's by design, you know? Like I've built teams that way, and that's how we're building Supervillain, you know? But the art and science thing is like, man, it's, and the business and the artistic side of things, it's all a big balance, you know? But with that being said, but that's why Supervillain also does, like, our own artistic projects. Right. Like, that's the best part, right? We have created a business, but we're also producing tequila right now, like our own tequila brand. Yeah, we're producing our own tequila brand. We're partnering with someone I can't announce yet, but we're producing our own like candles, scented candles.
Okay.
Right? And that's only because, like, yo, in terms of space, we have, like, in our mini campus, we have, like, 3 different units, and we might be opening up offices in other parts of the country where I'm like, yo, I want everyone to have the same, like, attachment every time they walk into one of our offices, be it a client or whatever. We're going to give those candles out to clients, so when they come to the office and they burn it, like, you know, so we're just playing right now, right? So that's that artistry side of our brand, of the Supervillain world, where we're doing that. We're messing around with merch right now.
Is there a record label too, or what?
What's that?
You guys got a record label going, or artist management?
Nah, we'll leave that to the folks who really can do that. But we're working with some folks that we're going to collab on in that space. Like for us, the artist side was just like, here's the thing: it's all about in the spirit of sharing, right? And we knew that at Supervillain, we created this thing called Supervillain Supply, right? Which is like, we're going to make anything that we use for our business and what we do for work day to day available to everyone else. Nice. And so if people, vibe with us, whatever, like, they can help be a part of it. But that's how we get our weird, like, artistic, creative sides out. We've commissioned this really great artist, Marcus Palu, from LA, to do work, to have his art here, like Supervillain inspired art. But that's how we support our artistic endeavors. It's just like, how can we just like create a bunch of experiments, whether they go anywhere or not, while retaining fundamentally the core business, right? The business has to live and breathe and succeed every day. So we're just not like being reckless. But at the same time, like these are these small projects that are really fun for us. And then, we're producing, like, for example, my parents gave me, a journal of theirs. It was their refugee journal from when they were refugees in Indonesia. There's this beautiful journal with letters and illustrations, and that's like another project of ours where we're going to reproduce that and hopefully send them out to people that are interested about the Vietnamese refugee experience. As we know, just the refugee experience in general is crazy, and there's so many of them. But that's how we get our artistic side in, is like we have projects that we do on the side that are meaningful to us.
It's really like writing your own narrative too and telling your stories.
Yeah, man. And that's what I like to call, like, people ask me like, what is Supervillain? And like you did. And it's hard for me to describe because we're a service organization, we're an agency, but I call Supervillain a tribute, Like Supervillain is a tribute in the sense that it is a tribute to every single person who's had to risk it to create opportunity for us, be it our own parents or other heroes in space, right? Like, when Supervillain was formed, like, and we were looking at, some of the people that we saw as heroes, we realized that they were villainized, right? Dr. King got a mugshot. Right. Rosa Parks got a mugshot. The Dalai Lama was exiled, right? Like, if you look at all the people that we really admire and respect, they were all villainized at some point too. So much of that like really runs in line with the things that we value and who we celebrate, and who we do the work for. And my parents had a mugshot when they immigrated, right? Like, or what looks like a mugshot. But so that's part of where the villain kind of idea and ethos comes in. But it also comes from a fact of like, sometimes the world tells you a story and maybe it's not always the right one. Sometimes the world puts a label on you and sometimes it's not always the right one. And I take that whole thing personally because, like, even though I'm known as like a pretty nice guy in the business, like, people have tried to turn me into a monster, Like, there are people out in this business that have tried to force me out of it because they didn't agree with the way I approach things, And me, man, like, I'm not trying to hurt anybody.
No.
But I'm like, but if I'm a monster, if I'm a villain, I'll be the worst one to you if we disagree on how the world should be,
That's actually a perfect segue. Speaking of Steph, talk about your recent work with the Curry brand.
Yeah, so we were lucky enough to do some work with Stephen Curry and Under Armour to help launch Curry brand. I'm a lifelong Warriors fan. People know that, right? Like, I used to have a Warriors blog. I was a season ticket holder during the years that they were horrible, right? Like, I used to travel to go see games. Like, I'm a diehard Warriors fan. And so to be able to work on Stefan's launch of Curry brand, which was kind of full circle, because when we were at Narrative with some of us, and when I was at Narrative, we launched his first signature shoe there, and that was out in New York, right? So I was like with Trisha at Narrative, we were able to work on Stefan at the time. And so that was years ago, but yeah, the working with Curry Brand, you know, they were looking to launch his brand, and I think they were just trying to figure out how to make it happen, because I think they were working with another group and it wasn't really hitting the mark. And so I get the call from Trisha, who's just like, yo, like, we need, you know, you around, you available to help bring this thing to life, right? And I was like, yeah, cool. Like, what needs to happen? They're like, well, we need to launch the brand in like 3 months, you know? And it was so much fun though, man. And it's one of those things where, you know, like, where like it just somehow happens, but like, I'm a massive fan of Stephen. I'm a massive fan of the Warriors. I believe in him and what he's about. And I've not only been a student of his game, but of him for so long. Like, it was so easy to go in and help craft, you know, the strategy, and then thus like bring the team together to come up with like a really great anthem film to help launch the brand, right? And so, and it was really great to be like the lead creative on the agency side in that regards, because I think we developed a piece and we approached the whole launch of the brand and that film in a way that I'm really proud of, right? And so when we launched it, we came up with that line, which I'm still in love with, which is like, change the game for good, right? Which is like about, again, it's about, it's so supervillain in the sense of like, it's about changing the world for the better. And it was such a line that worked so beautifully for Stephen, because not only did he change a game of basketball, but he's also trying to change the world for the better, right? And you just see it in what he does. And his Curry Brand was going to be an impact-based brand that was going to reinvest some profit into underserved populations and youth sports, right? And so that line, you know, we developed was just like absolutely perfect. And yeah, and being at the front of that was really special, because like, you know, Stephen's one of those guys like we just need more role models like him, right? Like, and I'm sure he doesn't want to be seen as a role model or whatever, but in the day of social media and whatnot, like, it's hard to find people that are like, yo, like, you're kind of doing most everything right, you know? And so it was a huge honor to work with him, and we produced the anthem spot, which was really great. And a big highlight of that for me was like our integration of Bruce Lee into that spot, right? Like, there's a big homage to Bruce in that piece, which was like a big deal for me, because like we wanted to celebrate, and I personally been waiting my whole life to see a really strong Asian man in media.
Yes.
Right? Like, in an advertising campaign that wasn't like a kung fu fucking film, you know, or whatever, you know, or like that wasn't like smart at math and the engineer in the TV show, you know what I mean? Like, and this was before, you know, that Marvel film that came out too, which I thought was really great. But yeah, for us to get Bruce in there, because Stephen's a big fan, and to have, you know, work with, you know, the Bruce Lee family, you know, enterprises to make that a reality was super dope, really special. And then also too, like, you know, to work with Chris Stone, you know, here, who's a local guy, you know, born and raised in the Bay, who works really closely with Stephen, who made that connect happen when I told him, you know, when we were like brainstorming and we were like, yo, what if we got Bruce in this, you know, for Chris to be all about it and make the phone call, and for all of it to happen within like this really short amount of time. We produced a piece that, like, during the height of COVID, I think we were one of the first productions in LA, right? We also shot a bunch of it out here in the Bay during the wildfires, where the wildfires were literally raging like 6 miles away from our location, which was nuts. And we got this fire track that was in it that I didn't think we'd be able to pull off, because we had to get like 14 or 21 clearances. But Trisha's a beast, and she made that happen. And but it was one of those very special pieces. Oh, and not only that, like, you know, Stephen has 2 daughters, right? He's all about women's sports and empowering women. And with this approach, we also brought in 2 co-directors, Nina Meredith and Dawi NM, as a female director, and Dawi a black director. And we were just like, yo, in the spirit of collaboration, what would a co-directorship look like? And it was beautiful, you know, and that was Nina's idea, right? Like, and And none of that, like that whole thing was great, man. Great clients, great team. We made it happen really quickly. But yeah, so that was massive, right? Like you get to work and, you know, work with or work for and launch a brand for a guy who's not only contributed so much to the area, but to the game of basketball, to how people see the world, you know. That was a big one for us, yeah.
Wow, I mean, what is like going through your mind, or how do you strategize for something like you have 3 months and all the ground to cover? Like how many like different roles are you filling? Project management, like how does that work?
Totally. Yeah, we had to hit the ground running, and Supervillain at that point wasn't like super established, right? Like there was just a couple of us. And so, you know, we brought in a really great creative team, Warren Frost, Jeff McCarthy, really great designer, Lawrence Ortiz. And then for me, like getting off the ground, like I was producer, I was wardrobe at one point. I was cutting the sleeves off of t-shirts for Steph. Like I was prepping, you know, like I was literally showing up with product to the shoots, right? Like, what else did I do, man? Like I was obviously like, I was trying to find the directors. Like I was playing producer and like getting all the treatments in. I was basically the lead creative director, overseeing the script, the campaigns. I was a strategy director as well, like, you know, working on the strategy and the positioning. I was in the edit. I was on set at the shoot, like also as like a quasi third director, as much as Nina or Dawi hated or loved it. It was during the height of COVID, so I was working with one of our producers to get like just to make sure like we were approaching all COVID protocols correctly. We had an amazing production company called Couscous as our partner on that, who was so fire, you know. So it was good, man. It was a scramble of an effort, and like the reality is like no one would know. Like that's the crazy part about production, as you guys know, right? Like no one actually knows how much goes into all of that. Yeah. But when you see that final output, and it comes out the way, you know, it did, even though like, you know, there were all these complexities to it because of the time and space and you know, there's a lot of great stories attached to that. But yeah, man, like when you got 3 months, you can either jump right in and just apply everything that you've ever learned to the moment and attack it, or it can paralyze you, right? And I think the key is like, yo, the best part is like when you believe in someone as much as Stefan, and you can back that, and you've been working your whole career in every job, and you're like, yo, why did I do all these things? And then in that very moment, you're like, wait a second, this is why. Because like we can solve literally every problem that's being thrown at us right now, you know? And then like even Trisha was a beast, and like getting the music clearances for Icon, you know, for Jaden's track, you know, like that whole thing. And then our clients were dope. Like it was such like a big giant collective effort from Under Armour, Curry brand, or Stefan's team, to the creative production outfit. Like it's one of those really nice moments where you look back and you're like, yo, this is because we all collectively want this for Stefan. Yeah. Right. And that's the coolest part, right? Is like, and that's when we were talking about earlier about what it means to be like a really great creative director. It's not about me. Right. It's about what is this, right? Because at the end of the day, too, like, you know, the piece took a turn, which I think it still ended up being like an amazing piece. But there's another version that, like, you know, I had to go back to the directors on, and like it didn't work out or whatever. But at the end of the day, I think everyone didn't really care, you know, how it ended up, because it's still a great piece. They just were so happy to be a part of it, you know? Yeah,
it's a dream piece indeed.
Yeah, it's a dream piece, and I think it's yeah, man. I think, and that's what I'm really proud of, is like being that connective tissue in a lot of ways. Even with the talent, man. Like we had really great talent. We had this really great baller at the end. Her name's Jet Neal, right? And her and her family are like the best. But like to be there and like really personally express, because it was COVID, like we couldn't have like clients on set. We couldn't have Stefan on set. Like we had to keep everyone separate. But for me, as the one person that was like on at every piece of this, and to personally communicate to people, you know, how important their role was, how much we appreciate it. That's what I love about what we do, man. Is like, because it takes so many people to make these things happen. And as a creative director, I get more joy out of personally telling people how grateful I am than like the end product itself. You know what I mean?
It just like goes with like what you're explaining. Like it really matters about your team and who you pick, and giving people the opportunity, and people will succeed if like they have the heart and the same vision. And
hats off to clients, you know, like the clients that bet on Supervillain time and time again, or who come choose us, you know, like I'm so grateful, you know, like I didn't expect Supervillain to be around after what we're starting our 3rd year. Like I'm just grateful for every day, man, you know. Like, I think that's the biggest part is like, how can you enter all this with great gratitude? Because at the end of the day, I get to create my creative side and my strategic side, my business side to the table every day for a job. Yeah. You know, and it's a blessing, and it's amazing when clients feel like it's a blessing. You know, like then it becomes like a really great partnership. You know, like I love it, man. When we just had this new business meeting. Well, we had several new business meetings last week, and I always get still emotional, man, when we leave one of those meetings or we drop off of Zoom, and you're like, whoa, like that energy was right. Like we are just in it together, you know, no matter what the project, like there's just a vibe there of like, this is a real connected partnership, you know?
Yeah, it's like you guys are making your own movie right now.
Yeah, for sure. You know, because like some people get the thrill off the sale. And don't get me wrong, like I love the sell, man. Like I love it when we close a piece of business and it's big or small, whatever. But I get the thrill of when we close a piece of business and I'm like, yo, that feels right. Right. Yeah. We're gonna do great stuff together, you know?
I know that feeling because when I first had a conversation with you, we talked to you, we all called each other afterwards and we were like, this feels right to work with you.
Yeah, well thanks, man. I appreciate that.
What advice would you give to any young creatives trying to do something that you're doing, be creative direction?
Yo, it's wild, man. I really feel for young people right now because, I don't know. Have you been following this like whole anti-work thing, or like
a little bit? Tell me.
The remote workforce thing. I don't know.
They're really not trying to get back in there.
Yeah, well, some people. I don't know, man. It's interesting. I'm not trying to be judgmental of any of this stuff, but I feel really bad for young people right now because, especially those who are just coming out of school. Right? Because like COVID, right? And there's this whole movement of people trying to do remote work, but those people who are trying to do the remote work thing have already established, for the most part, most of their careers, right? Yeah. And I get it, because like, dude, commuting sucks. Some offices are horrible. Like, they just want to avoid all the bad. But at the same time, I look back at it and I learned most of what I've known in this business by being in the room. Yeah. By being seen by my boss, or being seen by that creative, or having it, or speaking up in a meeting and someone's like, yo, that's a great idea, go do that. Right? But that's so different now with Zoom and being disconnected, you know? So my advice is for young people today is that, yo, like, continue to find ways to be in that room. Yeah. Right? Don't let the narrative of like this whole like anti-work or like remote work thing scare you off from being present and visible, right? Because I think that's key, you know? Like, it's like, I don't know, because like, I don't know, maybe I'm an old man and I'm like, yo, maybe it could all happen through social media and in Zoom, I don't know. But for me, I'm like, I'm also kind of like a purist in the sense of like, yo, how many really famous artists over this world's history were apprenticed first? Right. Yeah, a lot of them. Right? Or made a connection with someone that launched their career. You know what I mean? Like, or was inspired by sitting in like in the salon, like all the French impressionists just pushing each other to be better and share the work and put it up on the walls, right? Right. Like, what happens when you don't do that, you know? Yeah. And so with young creatives, I'm just like, there's a few things, and I think it has to be revised through what we do today. Is just like, yo, share your work as much as possible. I struggle with that one. Right? Yeah. Yeah, same here. Like, when you look me up, you probably find me attached to like nothing. Yeah. right? Because like I'm not posting it, I'm not whatever, because I'm like, and I've struggled, and don't do what I did. Young creatives don't do what I did, which is like when I leave a place, I always felt like that chapter was closed, so I'm not going to take my work with me.
Yeah.
You know, it's a new canvas. Take your work with you.
Take it with you, yeah.
Work on your portfolio. Tell your story.
Yes.
Right? I think that's the biggest thing is don't be afraid to use your voice and have a unique point of view. You know what I mean? Like, and don't play other people's games, right? Like play your game. And when I say that, it's not like you got to play the game in the system. But when I say play your game, it's like just know what type of player you are, right? Like understand the things that you care about, that you're passionate about, and really make those things visible, no matter what they are, man. Like for the longest time, I don't know if people really know this about me, but I spent 8 years in domestic violence prevention, and every interview I go to, I talk about that time, because I know if you don't hire me because of that, or if that freaks you out, I can't be here, right? And that's like a personal thing. Right. So for young creatives, it's okay to bring a bit of your personal passions into it, and be about the things that you care about. Because the last thing you want is to end up in an environment that doesn't believe in you, right? Like, that's the worst thing that can happen, because that's where the creative fire dies, right? When you have a place that doesn't see you, doesn't believe in you, won't bet on you, but maybe you want to be there because it's a big name or whatever, like that's the beginning of a really hard time where you're like, well, what am I doing, right? But if you're and you go find places and you're not afraid to pick up the phone call and be like, yo, I know this person, I want to go work with this person. If you're not trying to work with people who you know that you align with, or go work at places that see you, value you, or hear you, that's tough, right? Like, because that's the stuff that's going to propel you, right? And that's why, like, when I left Intel and I had a hard time finding another job, it wasn't because I wasn't capable, I know at this point in my career, I can confidently say I can smash any job, any place I walk into. I guarantee you, I'm gonna make a difference. Yeah. Right? But I wasn't taking jobs, or I wasn't hired at jobs because of what I believed in, and that's okay. Right? You just need to keep pushing through and find those places that will, because the last thing you want is, if you're a young creative with fire, if you're a young creative with the point of view that's gonna like really enhance this world and make it better. You owe it to all of us to keep that fire going. So find a place that's going to continue to fuel that. Don't go into a place just because you think it's a good name that's going to put that fire out. Right? Don't go to a place where your passion goes to die. Right? Keep chasing that fire. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, don't be afraid to reach out to people. That's the other thing, man. Like I've gone in and I've like talked at classes, and like I've judged like student work, in the class. And every time I leave, I'm like, yo, any of you guys can reach out to me, call me. Like, I'm here for you. Yeah. And it's shocking. Every time I leave, I maybe get like one person on average from each classroom that reaches out to me. And I'm always like, oh, I always found that really interesting. You know what I mean? Yeah. But I'm like, yo, don't be afraid to reach out, especially if someone's like, yo, let me know. Right? Yeah. Because the work is on you. The work is on you as a young creative to get that for yourself.
Yeah, I want to help everyone like break that barrier, because I have like many shots that I didn't take
for sure.
The same way.
Same.
And it's intimidating for some reason. Like I know that you're really available, but for some reason, like we build these walls. Yeah. I think like you don't want to bother someone. For sure. I mean, I struggle with that today. You know, like I have a hard time calling certain clients because I think like they're so busy or whatever. I still struggle with it, So I'm giving, again, like I'm also like giving advice to like also remind myself to do the thing I'm telling young bloods and not taking it personal. Like you hit someone up, they might just be super busy. Exactly. Just try again. Try again. Unless they tell you to F off, then you know. Then you know, and then you shouldn't be working with that person. Exactly. Even better, do you know that there might not be the client or the environment for you? Right. The one thing that I've always really appreciated. And I didn't really know this personally about Russell, but Trisha used to tell me this story when we were at Narrative. And I think
and I always really appreciate, because Trisha worked this way as well, right? Trisha worked this way, and she admired this part about Russell, which was like, hey, he will always take a meeting.
Okay.
And same with Trisha. Like, Trisha always hits me back. You know, she makes time for people that are interested in what she's about. You know, like, and a lot of, and not everyone that I've worked with has been that way, but then Trisha and Russell, and that Russell example is one example, but I also try to do the same.
That's true.
You know, and sometimes I actually never get back to people, right? Because I'm so busy, or I'm just like trying to keep the company going, or,
for sure,
or whatever. Like, I think I still owe Jordan a text.
Yeah,
right?
Jordan will text you back soon.
Yeah, Jordan, I'll text you back soon. But it's nothing personal, right? It's one of those things where, like, I know it's shitty.
Yeah.
But, like, today, just think about, have some empathy, right?
Yeah.
And I ask for forgiveness for people all the time, because I'm like, between Instagram, Telegram, Signal, Facebook, text, email, phone calls, LinkedIn, you know how hard it is to keep up with all that? You might just be missing someone.
Yeah.
Right? You might just be missing someone. Yeah, and not only that, show a little bit of grace if someone hasn't gotten back to you, because all we're trying to do half the time is just keep up, you know?
It's true.
Yeah.
I feel it out. I mean, it's part of business too.
Yeah.
Like, I make sure to outreach to people, but
Totally. If there's a little tightness there, just back off.
Just give it space, but just like, just let you know I thought about you. Okay?
Exactly.
If it's busy, it's all good.
Finesse it, and that's the thing. Don't like. It's almost like. And I don't know, man. I think it goes back to this one thing where, like, people always thought I'd never amount to anything, so I'm not worried about trying everything. Yeah. I wish I could apply that same thinking to, like, just reaching out to people, because the reality is that at the end of the day, like, you don't know if someone does or doesn't want to connect, right? But just try it, and yeah, especially if you're young, man, you need those looks.
Hey man, if you're young, just take those shots, because you really should just strike out left and right, especially in like your teens and your 20s, because you can learn so much.
It's good practice. I wish I did it more.
Me too.
I wish I did it more, because I'd be less afraid about it now.
At your career and life, what do you consider are keys to success for you?
I'm so grateful that you are asking me that question, first and foremost, because that means you think I'm successful. Oh, yeah. Right? And because the reality is, I'll tell you this, man, like, I know I've done a lot of great things, but I don't consider myself a success. You know what I'm saying? Like, and it's not because, like, I'm, like, insecure about it or whatever, but, like, because I feel really fulfilled. Like, I've thought about it a lot, and I've done everything in my career I've wanted to do. Personally, right? Like, there's some people that still want to do so much more, but I'm like, if I, like, had to leave the game tomorrow, I would have felt really good about what I've done. I would have groomed a lot of really great talent to be the next leaders in this business. I would have built something that challenged the way people think. I would have gone into old institutions and challenged them to be different, right? I would have fought for everything I would have believed in. But what's funny about that, and I love that you're framing it around success, because, like, I think that, like, in that sense, I am really successful, you know, and I appreciate that. And so, like, what would I say to people who want to feel that same way or what tips I have is, like, I don't know, man, it's going to be different for everybody, but for me, there's certain things that I've done for myself throughout the career, which is, I have this really big philosophy, which is, like, learn how to love everything, right? Like, that's been my superpower, man. Like, you can give me any project. I will go make banner ads. I will look at, like, I will be in an edit for, like, what's something I didn't really care about? See, it's hard to answer because I care about everything. But you could put me in an edit for, like, cat food. And I'm a dog guy, and I'll love it. You know why? You know why I love it? It's because it's not about me. Like, I want to learn how to love it because this is for somebody else, right? And that's where the real magic comes in, man. Like, it comes in because you care about this thing so much, because you know someone else is gonna care about it, right? And it's that level of like you removing yourself and empathy to really understand how you can make breakthrough work for everyone, right? Like, because that's the key to all this, man. It's like, and that's where I think the real magic happens, because when you're just making work for yourself, we need less of that. We need less of that, because like that's not coming from a place of empathy. It's not coming from a place of really seeing people. It's not coming from a place of trying to connect the world for the better. It's coming from a place of the way you see the world. And for you to be like, yo, I see the world the right way, is a bit self-righteous, you know, which some artists should do that, right? Because that's what art is. But for us, when the task is like, yo, there's going to be this product that like helps your cat be more healthy, yo, get down with that, you know, get down with what that means to that person who needs that. Because their cat's gonna live like another year, and that cat is that person's best friend. You know, like that's like a small example. But I've also been really lucky to only work on things that I actually can believe in. Right? There's just certain products and things that I'll never work on, like tobacco or whatever. You know. But I think in that same world, same vein, like, but I've worked on things like, gosh, man, like. Like I'm working right, like we've worked right now with an Ayurvedic doctor, right? And I'm her primary creative and strategist on it. And she's all about supporting women in their birthing journeys to heal generational trauma. Yo, the biggest compliment that she ever gave me, she was just like, you get my business. Yo, I'm a man.
Yeah.
I can't even bear children, right? Like physically. But like that's such a great compliment, because it's just showed me that like I've gotten to that place where I've understood it, and that's a beautiful part about it, right? Because when you are just constantly learning how to love everything, and not just in the business but in the world, you're going to be able to apply that to anybody, right? Because at a certain point you're going to be making a film, you're going to be making a piece of advertising, piece of content that has to connect with someone that you know nothing about. But do you have enough curiosity, and do you have enough heart and openness, right, to be about it? And I think that's why when you look at Supervillain's client roster, or when you even look at my own background and all the brands I've touched, I've literally worked on everything.
Yes.
I've literally worked on everything. You name it, for everyone. Yeah. And I don't know where that comes from. And it might come from like a lot of my service work or my community days, where I had to go out into the world and talk to people and connect with people so quickly. But that's been one of the keys to my success, so to speak, right? Yeah. It's just that insane curiosity, that same empathy, and that ability to not make it about me and to make it about the person that we're doing it for. And that's a bit of unconditionality that I think we do need in this space, right? At least depending on how you want to approach it, right? But yeah.
I mean, that's definitely one thing I would take away from this, is just being a people person and level of empathy from the editors, the clients, the creative directors, and everything out there. You're really just seeing what it's like in their shoes. For sure. I mean, yeah, man. And I think but that's also my personal opinion, because like to be honest, man, like I want to, like, because I've learned how to love everything, man. Like I can, like, everything excites me. Yeah. And like so many briefs come in, and they're like, we don't know if this is gonna be that exciting to you, or if it's like too small of a budget. And I'm always like, yo, like we could do great stuff with this. Yeah. You know, I'm like, and it's that level of like engagement that people want to hear from you as like a business person, right? They don't want to hear that you can just do it and do it on budget. They want to know that if you believe in it. Right. But yo, they'll sniff out 100% if it's not authentic. Right? So that's a skill that you need to own and harness every day that you are in the world, right? Because that's where we generate a lot of our inspiration, right? It's like, yo, can you do that as a person? And then can that translate over into like how you're pitching your business or how you're gonna sell it? Because at the end of the day, man, like I've worked a while in this business, and that half the time is the reason why I've won or been a part of teams that have won pitches, is because people are buying you. You've seen a lot of work out in the world. Not everything is amazing. True. Right? Like you've seen some work out there, and you're like, yo, how did this get made? Right?
I think there could be a whole podcast on like, yo, like how did that thing get made creatively? But I guarantee you the reason why I got there, well, sometimes it's you probably just have a client who pushes it through and it's like they've like reworked everything, it's their idea. But half the time, man, like when you're selling work, I guarantee you like so much stuff gets sold because one person trusts another. Right? Yeah. And at the end of the day, is it about the creativity or is it just about doing the right thing half the time? Right? And so you also, and I think when you're looking at the world constantly from a lens of other people, you'll start to also understand of when it needs to be, when you need to fight for it to be really about the higher order creative, or you'll also know when it just needs to do the job. Right? Because that's also a part of it, is like when you're in the business of working with brands and whatnot, like you also need to understand like when to fight for the creative and when it's just like a piece of a bigger story. But that's also why like I challenge like for me, part of the success question too is like I always go into every project and every brand and every opportunity as if I'm going to be on that piece of business for the rest of my life. Right? Because that's what my client is thinking. My client's thinking about like, yo, how might, like, you know, CMO tenures are short, but like the one thing I like to think about, man, is like most people I work with aren't in that job because they don't they don't care. Most people are in that job because they want to also leave a mark. They also want to leave a legacy, right? Like, and so part of my job half the time is like, yo, like, or part of how I find success is also thinking about how can I get my clients to love their own jobs again.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
and to love the work, to love the product again. You know, because sometimes you come across folks and like, you know, who lost their way.
Yeah.
But that's the greatest joy, man. That's when we also have so much fun, when we're just like, yo, like we're creating something special because like we want to leave some sort of impact, right? Leave something behind that we're all proud of.
Man, thank you so much for all of this. This is an amazing time with you. Creating just this conversation was amazing. Yeah,
thanks, man. No, thanks for the opportunity. I mean, it's one of those things where just like, yo, there's countless ways about it all, right? But I think, I don't know, man, I just push all of us to be better people.
Damn.
Right?
Yeah.
And everything will figure itself out. But if we can at least just bring that to what we do, you know, maybe we all can like create a better industry. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
That'd be cool. Maybe we'll make a part 2 on this.
Yeah, whenever you guys want,
drop
man.
by
Like,
again, see what people like.
Yo, even though I'm an introvert, people know I can talk for days. So.
Yeah, that's an interesting one.
Yeah.
Man. Well, I think that's it for this Meet the Creators podcast. I'm Nam Nguyen of Supervillain. Thank you all, and don't forget to subscribe and like it, and we'll see you guys in the next one. Thank you for tuning in to Meet the Creators. I hope you found value in today's episode. Don't forget to subscribe to our podcast, and please share with a friend.